It was around 6 in the morning when I opened the door to let some air in. I wasn't even properly awake yet. Just stepped outside in my flannel shirt and boots, yawning, thinking about coffee. And then I froze. There she was. A full-grown bear. Not in the woods. Not on the trail cam. On my damn porch. Not 10 feet from me. She didn't move. Didn't roar. Didn't charge. Just stood there. Shaking. Breathing heavy. Her fur was matted. Wet in places. Her eyes, God. Her eyes were leaking like a broken faucet. I'd never seen an animal cry like that. I mean actually cry. And then I saw what was in her mouth. A cub. Limp. Legs dangling like string. Head to the side. No movement. I wanted to slam the door shut. I wanted to reach for the old rifle by the kitchen wall. But I didn't. Something in her stopped me. This wasn't a threat. This was a mother on the edge of something I couldn't even name. My heart started hammering. I stepped back, slowly. She followed. 1 step. 2. And then she laid the cub real gentle, right on the wooden porch floor. Backed up. Sat down. Never broke eye contact. I knelt against every damn instinct I had. Every story, every warning. I got low, leaned closer to the cub. It looked dead. Small, barely the size of a cocker spaniel. Its ribs stuck out. Blood crusted on one ear. Then, a twitch. Barely anything. But it was there. The chest moved. Shit. I looked at the mother bear. She was watching every inch of me. I said, like an idiot. But it just came out. I'll try. Okay. I'll try. She didn't move. I wrapped the cub in my flannel, heart pounding, and backed into the house. The bear didn't flinch. She just kept sitting there, silent, like she knew something I didn't. Inside, I dropped the cub on the couch, grabbed towels, heating pad, bottled water, everything I could think of. He was cold, limp, but not gone. I peeked through the window. She was still there. I stood in the middle of my living room, holding a nearly dead bear cub, and thought, what the hell do I do now? And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just some freak animal encounter. This wasn't nature being cute or tragic. This was something else. Something that had chosen me for better or worse. And I wasn't ready. But the bear was. She stayed. All day. On my porch. Watching. Waiting. And that cub, he wasn't done yet. The cub lay on my couch like a pile of soaked towels. Lifeless. Cold. Barely there. I dropped to my knees and pressed 2 fingers gently against his tiny ribs. Nothing. I held my breath and leaned in, close enough to feel his scent. Earthy, wet fur, tinged with blood. Then, just barely, I felt it. The smallest rise and fall. A breath. Weak, but real. You're alive, I whispered. God damn it, you're alive. I wrapped him tighter in the flannel shirt and ran to the back room. Old space heater. I plugged it in, cranked it to high. Threw down blankets, towels, anything soft. Laid him in the middle like a baby bird in a nest. His breathing was shallow, barely moving his chest. His back leg was stiff. One ear had dried blood crusted around it. This wasn't just exhaustion. Something had happened to him. Outside, I heard scratching. Looked out the window. She was still there, sitting, watching, like some ancient statue. I picked up my phone. Dialed Mark, the closest vet I knew, though he mostly dealt with farm animals. Yeah, he answered, groggy. Mark, it's me. It's a bear cub. Injured. I mean really bad. Silence. You been drinking? No, damn it. I'm serious. The mother brought him to me. She just dropped him on my porch. She's still here. Long pause. Then, what the hell did you say? I don't have time to explain. What do I do to keep him alive? Jesus. Okay. Warm him up. Check for bleeding. Don't feed him yet, just fluids like honey water, dropper style. Keep him calm. I'll call Jenny. She used to work with wildlife rehab. I hung up and went to the kitchen. Found an old bottle of raw honey. Mixed it with warm water and used a turkey baster, closest thing I had to a dropper. Opened the cub's mouth gently. A few drops went in. Nothing. More. Then, a twitch. His tongue moved. That's it, I said. Come on. Stay with me. I sat beside him for an hour, maybe more. Talking, humming, swearing under my breath. The whole time, the bear outside didn't move. Once, I opened the door just a crack. She looked up, met my eyes, then lowered her head again. She was trusting me. That part still wrecks me. By noon, he moved his paw. Just a little. A lazy stretch like he was testing gravity. I laughed. actually laughed out loud, and tears hit my knees before I even noticed I was crying. I said, "You're not dying today. Not on my watch." I had no idea what I was doing. I was in over my head, surrounded by towels and blood and this tiny, broken body. But I knew one thing for damn sure. That cub wanted to live, and I wasn't about to let him go without a fight. By mid-afternoon, my living room looked like a damn animal clinic run by a lunatic. Blankets on every surface, towels piled high, space heater humming full blast. The cub lay right in front of it, swaddled like a newborn with one paw sticking out. Bleeding again. I checked it. Tear, maybe a bite mark. Swollen, red. That wasn't good. Infection could kill him faster than the cold. I grabbed peroxide, the kind I used for cuts on myself, dabbed a bit onto a rag and touched it to the wound. He flinched. Good. Pain meant he was still fighting. From outside came a soft grunt. I looked out the window. She hadn't moved. Not an inch. Still sitting in the exact same spot on the porch, her massive body coiled like a statue. But her eyes, they tracked every damn thing. I opened the door an inch. "He's still with us," I said quietly. "Barely, but he's here." She didn't respond. Didn't growl. Just breathed. Back inside, I sat down on the floor beside the cub. Gave him more honey water. His tongue flicked. Not much, but it was something. My phone buzzed. Mark again. "Jenny says you're insane," he said. "But she's also driving up with meds. She'll be there by nightfall." Thank God. He's bleeding from a leg, and I think he's got fever. Keep him warm. No sudden moves. Don't try to give solid food yet. And for the love of God, don't open that door wide. That mom won't stay calm forever. I knew he was right. It was a miracle already that she hadn't torn the walls down looking for her baby. But she hadn't. She trusted me. That made me feel worse somehow. An hour passed. Then another. The cub twitched more. Adjusted his head. Tried to roll. "Easy, bud," I whispered. "Not yet. Just rest." He made a sound then. Not a growl, not a whimper. Something in between. Like a broken toy winding back to life. I wiped his paw clean again. Blood was slowing. Still red, still angry, but not gushing. I could live with that. Outside, the bear paced for the first time. 2 steps left. 2 steps right. Then sat again. Like her body couldn't decide whether to stay or charge. I knew what that felt like. I lit the wood stove for more heat. The room got stuffy fast, but I didn't care. He needed warmth more than I needed fresh air. Night crept in slowly. The shadows shifted. And the cub, he opened one eye. Just one. I swear to God, it looked straight into mine. Not wild. Not tame. Just aware. Present. I whispered, "You're not alone, little guy. Not anymore." He blinked. Then drifted back out. That was the first time I thought he might make it. Not a guarantee. Not a promise. But a maybe. And that maybe was more than I had all day. The next morning, I woke up on the floor with a stiff neck and a pounding headache. The cub was still breathing barely, but something had changed. His eye, it was open again. And this time it didn't drift away. It locked onto me. He moved. Not much. Just a weak shift of his front paw like he was trying to scratch an itch. But it was the first deliberate movement I'd seen. My heart damn near exploded. I grabbed my keys. "All right, buddy," I said, wrapping him gently in a blanket. "Time to get you some real help." I placed him in a plastic bin lined with towels, then set it in the passenger seat. The mom was still outside. She rose the moment I stepped out with the bin. "He's okay," I told her, keeping my voice low. "I'll bring him back. I promise." I didn't expect her to understand, but maybe she did. She didn't growl, didn't move, just stared. I backed out the drive slowly. Every nerve in my body screamed. I didn't want to be the guy on the news who stole a bear cub and got mauled by the mom. The drive to Jenny's clinic took just under 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept checking the cub. His breathing was shallow. His paw twitched occasionally, but his eyes stayed half-lidded. I pulled up fast, ran inside, and shouted, "Jenny, I've got something. Emergency." She came around the corner in scrubs, coffee in hand, and nearly dropped it when she saw what I was holding. "No way," she whispered. "Where the hell did you get that?" "Long story. Mother brought him to me. Dropped him off like some kind of desperate delivery." She motioned to the back room. We rushed him onto a table. 2 vet techs joined us, wide-eyed. "That's a wild cub," one said. "Like, seriously wild. He's not aggressive, I replied. He's half dead. Help him. Jenny started examining him, checked vitals, looked at the wound on his leg. Jesus, this wasn't a fall, she muttered. This is a bite. Deep one. Upper jaw pressure. Adult male. Another bear did this? Yeah, likely a boar. Sometimes they kill cubs to force the female back into heat. Brutal stuff. That hit me like a brick. So this wasn't just a sick cub. He'd been attacked, hunted, left for dead. And the mom? She must have driven off the bastard and come to me as a last shot. What are his chances? I asked. Jenny didn't answer right away. Slim. Real slim. But he's a fighter. And you got him here in time. We'll do what we can. She looked at me. You trust me to try? I nodded. She trusted me. Now I'm trusting you. I stood by the glass watching them work. Fluids. Antibiotics. Jenny was a machine. Precise. Fast. The cub jerked once. Then went still. Everyone froze. Then a breath. Another. Shaky, but there. He wasn't done yet. And neither were we.
If you love stories about wildlife rescue, click the subscribe button below. Here's how the button looks on different devices. Every subscription helps spread these stories and raise awareness. The more people know, the more animals get the help they need. And remember, subscribing is completely free. Click subscribe now and join us in protecting wildlife.
The sun was dipping low when I pulled back into the driveway. The woods around my house had gone still. Too still. I killed the engine and just sat there for a second, hands clenched on the wheel. The plastic bin with the cub was on the passenger seat, lined with a fresh towel. He was breathing. Slow, steady, doped up with antibiotics and painkillers, but alive. I opened the door and stepped out, and that's when I saw her. She was already there, like she'd never left. The moment the gravel crunched under my boots, she stood up, her whole body coiled tight like a spring, her nose high, her breath loud and sharp. She had heard the truck, maybe even tracked it. Somehow she knew. Easy, I said, holding my palms out like an idiot. He's here. I brought him back. I walked around to the passenger side and gently lifted the bin out. Her head lowered slightly, but she didn't move forward. He's okay. Well, not okay, but better, she grunted, deep in her chest. Not a warning. Something else. It sounded like worry. I set the bin down slowly in the middle of the driveway. Backed off. Gave her space. She didn't move. She stared at the cub. Then at me. Back to him. I waited. And then she did the last thing I expected. She sat down. Not 10 feet from her baby. And she just folded her massive frame to the ground like she was settling in for the night. I didn't breathe for a solid minute. I whispered, "Why aren't you taking him? What are you waiting for?" No answer, of course. Just the wind through the trees and the occasional hoot of an early owl. The cub stirred, let out a weak little huff. Her ears perked. She leaned forward a few inches, then stopped, watching, always watching. I sat on the porch steps, both of us now in some kind of silent vigil. Minutes passed, then an hour. The light faded into dusk. She never moved. I brought out a flashlight, clicked it on and checked the cub. He was still breathing, still warm. I tucked the towel tighter around him. She shifted her weight but didn't come closer. "You're not taking him tonight, are you?" I asked. "You want me to keep watching him? To do your job?" It sounded ridiculous even as I said it. But maybe I wasn't wrong. She laid her head on her paws. And that's where she stayed. Through the whole night. Just outside the reach of the porch light. Still. Waiting. Trusting a stranger to keep her baby alive until she could get him back. And I knew then. She wasn't going anywhere. By the third day, the cub was moving around more. Not gracefully, he waddled like a drunk raccoon, but he was mobile. He ate from a bowl I'd filled with a mush Jenny recommended. Goat milk. Soaked dog kibble. Mashed berries. Messy as hell. But he ate. Outside, she was still there. Every morning, I'd open the door and there she'd be. Sometimes curled beside the steps, sometimes pacing the treeline. But always close. Always watching. I kept my distance. Left food and water for her a little ways out. Not that she ever touched it. She wasn't interested in my help. Just him. On the 5th day, I got my first visitor. Larry, my nearest neighbor, pulled up in his mud-caked pickup, stepped out looking pale. "You seen the bear?" he asked, straight to the point. "Yeah," I said. "She's mine." He blinked. "What the hell does that mean?" I explained it. Well, some of it. Told him she dropped off an injured cub, that I was trying to help. His face shifted from confused to horrified to pissed in under 10 seconds. You got a bear camped out by your house and didn't call anyone? She hasn't hurt anyone. She just wants her kid to live. This ain't Disney, man. People got kids. What if she snaps? She hasn't moved off my property once. He left angry. I knew that look. He called someone. 2 hours later, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up. Deputy Morales stepped out, thumb hooked on her belt. You harboring wildlife now, Mike? Not exactly. I told her everything. She listened, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When I was done, she said, You're lucky no one's hurt, but this is a problem. She trusts me. That bear came to me because she had no one else. She's still a wild animal. If this turns bad, it'll fall on you. I nodded. Then let it fall. She stared at me a long time. Then she sighed. I'll hold off the state for a bit, but you need an end to this. Fast. I thanked her. As she pulled away, I looked over at the bear. She was lying down, massive head resting on her paws, eyes never leaving the window. Inside, the cub batted a tennis ball across the floor. Clumsy but determined. His paw still had a scar, but the swelling was gone. He was getting stronger, but something else was happening too. He didn't bolt when I walked in, didn't flinch when I touched him. He watched me like he watched the forest outside, curious, cautious, but calm. And it hit me. He wasn't just her cub anymore. He was between two worlds now, half wild, half mine. And that was a line we couldn't walk forever. The knock on the door came early, too early for good news. I opened it to find Deputy Morales again, arms folded, jaw tight. They're sending a wildlife unit. Tomorrow morning. State level, she said. They're gonna tranquilize her and relocate if you don't do something first. I felt it in my stomach, like a gut punch. You said you'd hold them off. I did. And now I'm out of time. I looked past her to where the bear was still curled beneath the pine trees. She wasn't pacing anymore, just waiting. As always, Morales added softer. You can end this your way, or let them do it theirs. After she left, I sat on the floor next to the cub. He was chewing on the toe of one of my boots. Happy, safe, oblivious. All right, kid, I muttered. Time for you to go home, whether you like it or not. I packed him into the bin again, towel, blanket, bottle of the berry mush he liked. He whined just once. I drove slowly, through back trails, over muddy hills, to a spot I knew, deep woods where the forest gets so thick it eats sound. I got out, opened the bin. He didn't move at first, just blinked at the sudden change. Then looked at me, like, what's the game this time? A crunch of branches. She was there, not far, 30 feet maybe, watching us from the shadows, her breath misting in the cool air. I stepped back. He's yours. She didn't move. The cub climbed out of the bin, awkward and slow. He stood on all fours, sniffed the ground, then looked up. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, recognition, relief, fear maybe. And then he cried out. A tiny sound, nothing like a roar, more like a gasp. And she moved. She approached, slowly, head low, body tense. I held my breath, ready to run. But she didn't charge. She stopped beside him, nose pressed to his fur, sniffed him all over. He leaned into her. My eyes stung. I turned to go. But then something strange happened. She looked at me, not like an animal, not like a threat, like a parent. She turned her head to the cub, nudged him gently toward me, then back again. He hesitated. She let out a low sound, soft, almost encouraging. And he walked back to me. I knelt down, and he pressed his head against my chest. I heard myself whisper, "What the hell are we doing here?" She didn't come closer, didn't push him again. Instead, she turned, slowly, vanished into the trees without a sound. And he didn't follow. That was the moment I realized she had made the choice I couldn't. She gave him back. It's been 2 months since that day in the forest. Since she walked away. I waited. I stood there like an idiot for a long time, holding the cub while the wind creaked through the trees. But she never came back. Not that day. Not the next. Not once. I kept expecting to find tracks outside the house. Claw marks on trees. A fresh kill dropped nearby. Nothing. She vanished. But the cub, he stayed. I gave him space. Built a little pen outside, half-fenced with logs and climbing stuff. He hated it. Busted out within a week. So now he just stays near. Comes and goes. Sleeps under the porch sometimes. Wanders during the day. Comes running when he hears the rattle of the dog food bin. He's not a pet. God knows he's not tame. But he's not wild either. He lives in the space between. Sometimes I catch him staring at the treeline for hours. Nose twitching, ears perked. Waiting for her. I do the same. Every night. I sit on the porch with a flashlight and a cup of bad coffee. Listening. Hoping. Wondering. Sometimes I hear rustling in the dark. Low footsteps. A breath. But nothing comes into view. Nothing shows itself. I've stopped calling it paranoia. Now I just call it routine. One night, around 3 weeks ago, I found a dead rabbit near the edge of the woods. Clean kill. Untouched. No blood trail. No signs of scavengers. A gift. That same night, the cub wouldn't stop pacing. Crying, almost. Whimpering in a way he hadn't since the first week. She'd been there. I know it. She's checking in. Watching. Letting him stay, but not letting him forget. And maybe that's the point. He's part of both worlds now. He sleeps beside the woodpile but chases squirrels like he's got something to prove. He play fights with the neighbor's dog and then climbs a tree like a shadow. He doesn't belong anywhere. But somehow he fits here. And me? I still leave the porch light on. Still stack berries by the edge of the forest. Still watch the shadows. Not because I expect her to return, but because she already left what mattered. This messy, stubborn, wide-eyed piece of her. He's enough. But I'll be honest. Every time the wind shifts, every time the night goes too quiet, every time he lifts his head and stares into the dark like he knows something I don't, I get this feeling in my gut. Not fear. Not hope. Just the sense that the story isn't over. Not yet.